Welcome back to Hysteria via Backyard Politics, of course. Maddie with you again. We're going to be talking about Ford today, the motor company. I think you may have heard of them. Started in 1903 by this strapping chap, Henry Ford himself. 1903 started. Within the next 15 years, he built the largest factory on Earth at the time. So they were doing pretty good. Around the same time this starts happening, Germany starts its illegal rearmament, which, after World War I, Treaty of Versailles, they weren't supposed to do this. They decided to do it anyway. We know that story. Anyway, they need a little help with the rearmament, so who do they hire to help them out? That guy. And Ford starts building factories in Germany to help their war machine, building them tanks, mostly trucks and other vehicles like that, but building them, pretty much everything. Now, oh, you don't want to see that yet. There was rumors going around that Henry Ford might be anti-Semitic. Maybe he doesn't like Jews so much. So he buys this newspaper called the Dearborn Independent, and one of the articles he wrote himself was this one. He goes on to say, well, this sums it up. The international Jew is the world's foremost problem, is actually his full quote. There was also a company policy within Ford where they wouldn't hire Jews except for manual labor. So you couldn't be Jewish and work in the office or management or anything like that. So anyway, back to Germany, where Ford now has factories for the war machine for the Nazis. This is one of theirs, actually. It's kind of, if you look close, you can see it says Ford. Obviously, German military truck. By 1935, Ford was the second largest producer of Nazi military trucks. Crazy stuff. So then Germany, the World War II is brewing up pretty bad. The United States hasn't entered yet. Germany takes Austria. 4 months later, they give Henry Ford the Grand Cross of the German Eagle, which is essentially, it's like the United States Medal of Freedom. It's the highest honor you can get from Nazi Germany. So they give Henry Ford that. It was given to him, obviously, by this fellow for, and I quote, distinguished service to the Third Reich. Ford. Okay, so as a birthday present, this is to show they were friends, by the way. As a birthday present, Henry Ford gives Hitler, how much? $35,000 back then as a birthday present, which would today be worth about $650,000. So, happy birthday! And yes, that is German chocolate cake. Okay, so right before the U.S. enters World War II, obviously all of Europe was involved in it at the time. So, the United States trying to help out Britain, and they essentially come to Ford and say, hey, we made this proposal for you to build a bunch of British, fighter planes to help them out. Henry Ford personally vetoes this because he doesn't want to help them, but he doesn't say why. Okay, so 1941, the U.S. officially enters the war, and talk about double dipping. Now Henry Ford is building Jeeps for the U.S. military, as well as tanks, planes, and all these other things. So he's getting the United States to pay him to build, war machines, and then the Nazis are getting to pay him too. He's just collecting from all ends. Evil genius. So he gets those contracts and stuff, and good for him. So the reason why this says top secret is because after 1941, Ford said that they didn't have control over their German factories anymore. They were not in their hands anymore. The weird thing, though, is managers from the German factory frequently met with managers from the American Ford company in Portugal to discuss business. So if you're not in control of your German factories, yet you're having a secret meetings elsewhere with Nazis. By the way, the managers of the Ford Nazi plants were actually registered Nazis. They weren't just there to, like, waving the flag supporting. They were registered Nazis and all that. Yeah, a little bit weird. It gets worse. Don't worry. Don't worry. So in 1942, the Nazis kidnapped thousands of teenagers, young boys and girls, to work in their factories. It was bad. They had to live there. They had to work there. They weren't paid. They were barely fed. And there's a woman by the name of Elsa Iwanoa. And years later, many years later, I think in the 90s, she ended up winning a lawsuit with Ford where they had to, compensate her for almost killing her. She said, the only reason I survived was because I was young and fit, because the conditions were so bad. She was, I think, 16 years old when that happened. So, going back to the war, imagine being an American GI. You roll over, start fighting the war, you start taking down the Germans a little bit, but then you realize their Jeeps look a lot like yours. A lot like yours. Nazi Jeep, American Jeep. Nazi, American Jeep. Because Ford made both of them. For both sides. Sick. So the war ends, and then the United States is like, let's have reparations for any companies that may have been hurt because of this. And Ford ends up getting millions of dollars from the United States because their factories over there were damaged. The factories that were making the Nazi war machine were damaged during the war, and so we decided to pay. You get where I'm going, right? Okay. Time for some quotes, just to lighten the mood. This is Heinrich Himmler. Essentially, it was Hitler's right-hand man. And he says this: Henry Ford is one of our most valuable and important fighters. Himmler said that. Matters worse. Hitler said, I regard Henry Ford, almost said Himmler Ford, which actually would make sense. I regard Henry Ford as my inspiration. Yeah, all of the things I've talked about in this video so far, I have, cited sources of where it came from. This one's really easy to cite because this quote was in Mein Kampf. Mein Kampf. Hitler's. Okay. Sorry, I'm getting a little worked up. It's going to be all right. Just need to breathe. So anyway, I don't know what else there is to know about what I just said other than just because you buy a Ford, it doesn't mean that you're supporting the Nazis. It just means that you're financing what they've already done. So that's one more episode in the books. For Hysteria via Backyard Politics, I'm Maddie. Thanks for joining us. Make sure to subscribe and share and all that fun stuff. And until next time, Mary Carey with you.